What would you do if a stranger gave up her first-class seat for your sick daughter, and by the time the plane landed, your entire life had changed? The airport was a storm of noise and movement. Announcements crackled overhead like thunder. Wheels of rushing suitcases left streaks across polished tile, and voices blended into a constant hum of urgency. Jack Callahan tightened his arms around his daughter, Emily. She clung to his chest like a lifeline, her small fingers digging into the fabric of his worn-out coat. Her breath was shallow, too fast, and her forehead burning. Emily had been sick for over a week, and it wasn't getting better. This trip wasn't a vacation. It wasn't even about hope anymore. It was a mission. Jack's boots hit the floor harder now, worn from double shifts and side jobs, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. He glanced up at the terminal screen. Flight 382, final call, gate D14. He broke into a jog. The canvas duffel over his shoulder bounced with each step, its broken zipper held together with hope and a safety pin. Dangling from his wrist was Emily's pink backpack, faded unicorns, a broken zipper pull. It had once carried snacks, now it carried prescriptions. The gate agent was just about to lower the rope. "Please," Jack called out, breathless. "My daughter's sick. I need to be on this flight." The woman behind the desk looked up, startled for just a second, then softened. Her voice was tired but kind. "Sir, the flight is full. The standby list is closed." Jack felt his knees go weak. He couldn't do this again. Couldn't explain to Emily that they'd have to try again tomorrow, or maybe never. "Just one seat," he begged, almost whispering. "One seat's all I need." The woman pressed a finger to her headset, then began typing. A pause, another pause, then she looked up. "You're lucky. One passenger missed their connection, seat 33F. Doesn't recline, right next to the bathroom. Do you want it?" Jack's voice cracked. "I'd take a crate in the cargo hold." She handed him the boarding pass. "Good luck, Mr. Callahan." Jack nodded once. "Thank you," and rushed through. Emily stirred slightly in his arms. She was burning up, but still wrapped her arms around his neck like she was afraid of falling. The plane was cramped and full. People looked up, then quickly looked away. Jack didn't care. He moved straight to the back, past rows of headphones, annoyed sighs, and carefully folded arms. Seat 33F. It was everything the agent had warned him about. Loud, cramped, smelled faintly of disinfectant and something worse. But it didn't matter. He sat down, shifted Emily in his lap, and tried to get her comfortable. She whimpered. Her breath rattled. Jack leaned down, brushed the hair from her face. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered. "We're almost there." But she didn't calm. Instead, the whimper turned to a cry, high-pitched. Weak, but insistent. The kind that slices through an airplane like a knife. Jack bounced her gently. He hummed the lullaby she loved. Nothing worked. He could feel the eyes on him. A businessman adjusted his headphones, clearly annoyed. An elderly woman turned and gave a look half pity, half judgment. Jack shrunk into the seat. This wasn't the first time he'd been stared at like this. When you're a single dad, people don't see effort. They see chaos. When your kid's crying, they see failure. But what no one saw was the hours he worked to pay for this ticket. The double shifts at the garage, fixing the neighbor's heater at midnight for gas money, sleeping in the back of his truck just to save enough for this flight. Also, Emily could see a doctor in Boston. Not just any doctor, Dr. Whitaker, a pediatric specialist who had agreed to see Emily before retiring. This was Jack's last shot. A flight attendant approached. Her face was kind. "Sir, can I bring you a blanket?" Jack looked up, eyes tired. "Yes, please. Thank you." She nodded, leaned in closer. "You're doing a great job. She probably just needs some rest." That sentence, so simple, so gentle, broke something inside Jack. No one had said that to him in months. Not since his wife passed. He took the blanket, wrapped Emily tighter, and leaned his head back. She cried less now. Just little hiccups of breath. He looked around, unsure if he'd be able to close his eyes at all. Then suddenly another flight attendant appeared, this one moving quickly, a message crackling in her headset. "Mr. Callahan?" Jack sat up straight, alarmed. "Yes? We've been asked to move you and your daughter to the front of the plane." He blinked. "What?" She smiled. "A passenger requested it?" "Seat 1A. She specifically asked for you and your daughter." Jack looked confused. Why? Who? But the flight attendant was already leading him forward. Passengers stared as he passed again, this time walking up the aisle, not back. And that's when he saw her. A woman in first class, graceful, still. Eyes locked with his like she'd been expecting him. She nodded toward the seat beside her. "She can sit here," she said softly. Jack didn't know what to say. He just followed the voice. Carefully, he lowered Emily into the seat. The space felt unreal, quiet, clean. He looked at the woman again. Her eyes weren't judging. They were seeing. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Why are you doing this?" She didn't answer with logic, just kindness. "Because you look tired, and no little girl should struggle through a flight like that." Jack couldn't speak. He just nodded. And beside him, Emily sighed in her sleep. The first-class seat felt like a dream Jack didn't belong in, soft leather. A real pillow, enough space for his legs to stretch without hitting the seat in front. But Jack didn't care about any of that. His eyes were on Emily. She had stopped crying. Her little chest was rising and falling gently. The fever hadn't broken, but the calm was a gift. Her small hand gripped the edge of the blanket like a lifeline. Jack looked at the woman beside him. She had returned to staring out the window. Her posture was straight, controlled. But there was something fragile beneath that calm. Jack cleared his throat softly. "Thank you," he said. "I still don't really understand why you did this, but thank you." The woman didn't answer right away. Then, with a small turn of her head, she looked at him. Her voice came quiet, gentle. "Because I've been tired like you." She paused. "And I once watched someone suffer alone. I don't want to be too late again." Jack didn't know how to respond. Her words carried weight, like she wasn't just speaking about travel or kindness. She was speaking from a wound. "Do you have kids?" Jack asked carefully. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. But her voice dropped, lower than before. "I did." 2 words, but they hit Jack like a stone. He glanced down at Emily and understood. "Not everything, but enough. I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to." "No," she interrupted softly. "You didn't do anything wrong." She took a breath. "My daughter. She never got to grow up." Not even one breath. Jack's chest tightened. He'd known grief. He'd buried his wife when Emily was born. But the grief in this woman's voice was different. Colder, older. Polished with time, but still sharp. He didn't speak. He just let the silence exist between them. Sometimes that was the only kind thing you could offer. She adjusted the bracelet on her wrist, a delicate silver chain with a small airplane charm. Jack noticed it for the first time. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "The charm. Did you buy it for her?" She nodded. "Before she was born, I imagined she'd love flying, that we'd travel together. I even had little aviator socks picked out." Jack smiled softly. "My wife had a thing for books. She stocked the nursery with picture books from every country." He paused. "She didn't survive the birth." The woman's eyes met his again. 2 strangers. One grieving mother, one widowed father, and a little girl sleeping between them like a fragile bridge. "I'm Jack," he said. "And this is Emily." She smiled faintly. "I'm Ava Carter." Something about the name echoed in his mind, but he was too tired to chase it.
Ava leaned slightly toward Emily. She's beautiful. You can see her mother in her, can't you? Jack nodded.
She's got the same eyes and the same stubborn streak. Ava chuckled gently, then turned quiet again. She looked out the window as the clouds stretched endlessly below them. For a few minutes, the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't lonely. It felt sacred.
Jack whispered, I didn't think we'd make this flight. She's sick, real sick, and the doctor we're going to see, he's retiring.
We had one chance to get in. Ava turned to him with full attention now. And you used it. That's what matters. He nodded slowly.
I spent my last savings on this ticket, fixed a heater last night to get gas money. Haven't slept in 2 days. He didn't mean to unload it all.
But something in Ava's eyes made it feel okay.
And yet, she said gently, you're still standing.
Jack looked down. Barely. She paused. You're not alone, Jack, not now. The words took his breath away. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear that. He hadn't realized how deeply loneliness had wrapped itself around his bones. And somehow, this woman, this stranger, had broken through it. Not with grand gestures, but with kindness, with space, with quiet, with seeing. Emily stirred in her sleep, one hand reaching out blindly. Ava instinctively placed her own hand gently over Emily's. The little girl calmed, settled again, and that one moment, small, unplanned, brought tears to Jack's eyes. He wiped them away quickly. I don't know what this is, he whispered, but thank you for sharing your seat, your space, your story. Ava looked back at him. Thank you for not pushing it away. Outside, the sky had darkened slightly, sunset creeping in along the curve of the horizon. Inside, the hum of the engines filled the space between two aching hearts, slowly learning to breathe again. The plane rose higher, pushing through layers of clouds like a needle through cotton. Jack Callahan sat still, Emily curled tightly in his arms, her tiny body finally resting, her breathing softer now. His muscles ached from holding her so long, but he didn't dare shift. She needed this peace. She hadn't slept properly in days. Across from them, Ava Carter gazed quietly out the window. The clouds outside stretched endlessly, but her mind wasn't on the sky. It was on the man beside her. Jack wasn't just exhausted, he was unraveling. The kind of exhaustion that came from more than a long day. This was years of fighting alone, of carrying everything and daring not to drop a single piece. Ava reached down and gently unwrapped the airline blanket around her lap. Without a word, she leaned forward and tucked the edge of it around Emily's shoulder. Jack turned slightly. Their eyes met. He gave a faint nod of thanks. Long night? Ava asked softly. Jack let out a tired breath. Long year. They both chuckled, not out of humor but shared understanding. The kind of laugh that says, I see you. I've been there. I've never flown first class, Jack said after a pause. I didn't even know they gave you slippers. Ava smiled. It's overrated, unless you're sharing it with someone who actually needs it. Jack looked down at his daughter, then back at Ava. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. But I do. His voice cracked a little. You didn't have to do this. Most people just look away. Ava folded her hands in her lap. You reminded me of someone I used to know. Someone I couldn't help. I saw you and your daughter, and I guess I just didn't want to make the same mistake again. The hum of the plane filled the silence between them. It wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy with the kind of things you don't usually say out loud to strangers. Jack cleared his throat. Her name's Emily. She's 6, loves jelly beans, hates medicine, and thinks clouds are made of whipped cream. Ava smiled, the corners of her eyes softening. Emily, that's a beautiful name. My wife picked it. She passed away during childbirth. It's just been the two of us since. Ava's fingers tightened briefly. I'm sorry. Jack nodded. I used to think I needed to be everything for her. Mum, dad, nurse, clown. But truth is, sometimes I'm just scared. All the time. Ava's voice lowered. That's not weakness, Jack. That's love. For the first time in hours, Jack leaned back against the seat. His head rested against the cushion, and a quiet sigh escaped him. Emily shifted but didn't wake. Her fingers tightened gently around his shirt. I couldn't afford a hotel, he murmured. We slept in the car last night, just so I could be at the gate in time this morning. And when they said there was only one seat left, I thought we were out of chances. Ava stayed silent, listening with the patience of someone who understood that sometimes the greatest gift is space. Space to speak, space to break. She's sick, Jack whispered. Something rare, the kind of thing doctors shrug at unless they've seen it before. We're trying to reach one who has... He's about to retire. This might be our last shot. Ava's hand moved slowly, resting gently on the armrest between them. Close, but not invasive. I had a daughter, she said after a long pause. Her name was Lily. She never made it out of the hospital. Premature. We tried everything, but it wasn't enough. Jack turned toward her. The weight of his story suddenly felt less isolating. She would have been 5 this year, Ava said. I used to imagine her in a seat like this, watching cartoons, throwing pretzels on the floor. Now I fly alone. Jack didn't say anything at first. Then, with quiet respect, he offered, Maybe you're not flying alone today. Ava looked at him. There was no pity in his face. No awkwardness, just honesty, and something else, acceptance. I needed to hear that, she said. Thank you. Emily stirred again. Her cheeks flushed, but her breathing steady. She opened her eyes for a moment and stared up at Ava. Then, without speaking, she reached toward the silver airplane charm on Ava's bracelet. That's for my daughter, Ava said softly. I bought it before she was born. Thought we'd travel the world together. Jack looked at the charm. She still is, in a way. Ava swallowed hard. I hope so. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. Outside, the sky had deepened into twilight. The clouds were now glowing gold from the setting sun. The soft hush of the cabin felt sacred somehow. Like they were suspended not just in air, but in something timeless. I don't know what this is, Jack said, but I feel like I was supposed to meet you. Ava didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at Emily. Then at Jack, then out the window. Maybe we all get one moment like this, she said. One flight, one choice, that changes everything. Jack glanced at her again. I don't even know your full name, she smiled. Ava Carter. He repeated it quietly. Ava. And in that instant, something shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but deeply. Two lives carrying so much weight had collided in a place neither of them expected. Ava reached into her small purse and pulled out a simple card. She handed it to Jack. If you ever need anything, really anything, don't hesitate. Jack took the card, looked at it, then back at her. Thank you, he said. Not just for the seat. For all of it. Ava smiled. Thank you for letting me be part of it. Outside, the clouds rolled on, unaware that inside, a miracle had just taken place. Not the kind that comes with flashing lights or dramatic rescues, but the quieter kind. The kind where someone reaches across an aisle, across grief, across fear, and makes another person feel less alone. The cabin lights dimmed even further as the flight moved into its final cruising altitude. Most passengers had retreated into their own worlds, reading, dozing, fidgeting with headphones, but at seat 1A and 2B, something unspoken had taken root. Jack Callahan sat perfectly still, his arms curled protectively around Emily. The child's head rested peacefully against his chest, her small body finally at ease. The rasp in her breath had eased slightly, though Jack still counted every inhale in the back of his mind. Beside him, Ava Carter kept her eyes on the window, but her mind was far away. She had offered her seat out of instinct, kindness, maybe a little guilt. But now, with Jack and Emily beside her, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Presence. Not the social kind. Not the kind you put on in a boardroom or a fundraiser or on a sleek magazine cover, but the real kind. The kind that roots you to the moment and quietly asks, what if this is where you're meant to be right now? Ava turned slowly toward Jack. She looks better, she said softly. Jack nodded, eyes on his daughter. She's tough, always has been. You too. He looked up at her. The expression in his eyes was almost defensive, like he wasn't used to being complimented and didn't quite know how to receive it. I'm just trying to keep us afloat, he muttered. There's no medal for that. You don't need a medal, Ava replied. You need a hand. He studied her, unsure what to make of this stranger who spoke with such quiet confidence. You're not like most people, he said, voice low. Ava raised an eyebrow. How so? You don't talk to fill space. You listen. That's rare. A small smile crept across her face. I've had to do a lot of listening. Especially after losing Lily. Jack shifted gently, careful not to wake Emily. You said that was your daughter? Ava nodded. She would have been 5 this year. Jack didn't speak. He didn't need to. Ava could feel the silence settle into something that didn't demand words, just presence. She was born early, Ava continued. Too early. We tried everything. Specialists. Flights to Boston. Second opinions. Hope. But her lungs were never ready. She blinked hard, willing back the swell of memory. Jack whispered, I'm sorry. So was I, she said. For a long time, I blamed myself. I blamed God. I blamed anyone who didn't have to bury their child. The rawness of her honesty hung between them. Not pity, not drama, just the truth of grief. Grief that time doesn't erase, only teaches you to carry differently. I used to sit in this very seat, Ava said, tapping the armrest, and look around at people who seemed whole, smiling families, happy couples. And I'd wonder how the world kept spinning. Jack looked at her, not with curiosity but with understanding. I know that feeling. I bet you do. Then came a sound that stopped both of them cold. Emily stirred. A soft whimper escaped her lips and she reached out blindly. Jack adjusted quickly, whispering, I'm here, Em. It's okay. You're okay. But instead of reaching for him, Emily's small hand found Ava's. Clutching it tightly, Ava froze. Jack looked down in surprise, but didn't pull away. I guess she trusts you, he said, voice laced with disbelief. Ava gently curled her fingers around Emily's. Children know, she whispered. They can feel what's safe, what's real. Emily's eyes remained shut, but her grip stayed strong. She didn't cry, she didn't cough, she simply held on. Ava's breath caught. For a brief moment, something she thought had died inside her flickered. Jack noticed the change in her posture, the quiet tremor in her hand. You okay? She nodded, eyes glassy. It's been a long time since someone reached for me like that. Jack didn't respond with words. He didn't need to. He simply adjusted his seat so that Ava and Emily were closer. A triangle of warmth between them, quiet, unassuming, but full. You said you blamed yourself, Jack murmured, for your daughter. Ava nodded slowly. I've done that too, he confessed. Not about losing Emily, but about everything else. The hospital bills, missing work, not being able to afford the good insurance. Sometimes I think, maybe she deserves more than me. Don't, Ava said, firm but gentle. You're exactly who she needs. That little girl didn't grab my hand because I'm rich or kind or wearing first-class slippers. She did it because she already has her home in your arms. Jack's throat tightened. The hum of the plane softened as turbulence smoothed out. Lights above blinked. Somewhere, a baby cried in the back, but none of it touched the stillness between seats 1A and 2B. Ava spoke again, softer this time. You know, I haven't had a real conversation in months. Not one that wasn't about business, deadlines, logistics. She turned toward Jack. You're the first person who's asked about Lily in I don't know how long. Jack held her gaze. Well, she matters. You matter. The words surprised both of them. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't even comfort. It was recognition. Two people who hadn't felt seen in a very long time now, sitting side by side. Not just in seats, but in spirit. Emily stirred again, this time letting out a soft sigh. Her body slumped deeper into Ava's side. I think she's made her choice, Jack whispered. Ava smiled through her tears. I think she has. For the first time in 5 years, Ava Carter felt like she belonged somewhere other than a conference room. And for the first time in months, Jack Callahan felt like he wasn't carrying the weight alone. Above the clouds, at 36,000 feet, something impossible was happening. Not romance, not even destiny. Something quieter. A bond, forged not by attraction, but by understanding. Not by need, but by grace. And as the seatbelt light flicked back on, neither of them noticed. Because in that moment, they were already anchored not to a place, but to each other. The hum of the engines remained steady as the plane cut through the upper sky, but down in seat 1A, a different kind of stillness had taken over. Jack Callahan sat quietly, his fingers gently stroking the hair of the sleeping child in his lap. Emily's breathing was slow now, her cheeks flushed not with fever, but with comfort. His eyes, however, weren't on her. They were on Ava Carter. She sat with her arms folded gently across her lap, her eyes closed, but she wasn't asleep. Jack could tell. There was a kind of tension in her stillness, like a woman holding in too much for too long. A tiny airplane charm dangled from her bracelet, catching the dim overhead light. Jack spoke softly. That bracelet. It means something, doesn't it? Ava opened her eyes slowly. It was meant for my daughter. I bought it before she was born. I thought it would be her first charm. Something to start a collection for the places we'd go. Jack looked at the charm, then back at her. She didn't get to see any of them? He asked. Careful. Ava shook her head. She never made it past the hospital's delivery room. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Jack didn't try to fill it with apologies. Instead, he leaned into it, offering the only thing he had left presence. She'd be proud of you, he said finally, if she saw the woman sitting here today. Ava smiled, but it was tinged with grief. I hope so. There were days I didn't want to keep going, but I had to learn how to stay alive without her. Jack nodded. That's the part no one talks about. How to live with the empty space. A beat passed. Ava turned her eyes toward the little girl sleeping between them. She's beautiful, Jack. You're doing more than staying alive. You're giving her something she'll carry forever. He lowered his head slightly. Some days, it doesn't feel like enough. It is, Ava said, her voice low but certain. You showed up. That's the hardest part. Jack looked at her, trying to understand how a woman like this, graceful, elegant, clearly well off, could understand his world of second-hand shoes, expired insurance cards, and pawned wedding rings. Then she said something that told him everything. I grew up watching my mum work 2 jobs, nights in a hospital laundry room and days cleaning motels. We didn't have a car. We walked to the bus stop at 4 a.m. I know what it means to make do. Jack's brows lifted, surprised. I wouldn't have guessed that. That's the point, Ava said. No one does. They see the boardroom, the foundation galas, but they don't see where it began or what it cost. She paused, her voice softening. When I saw you in the back of that plane, carrying her, tired, embarrassed, trying your best, I saw my mom. And I saw myself. You weren't someone to pity. You were someone I recognized. Jack swallowed hard. That word recognized landed like a lifeline. So you got up, not just to give me a seat? No, Ava said, her voice full now, unwavering. I got up because I know what it feels like when no one else does. Jack looked down at Emily again, her small hand now resting against his chest. Then he looked back at Ava. I haven't told anyone this, but his voice cracked slightly. There were days I didn't know if I could keep going. After my wife passed, Emily got sick. I worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. I started to believe maybe I was failing her. You weren't, Ava said gently. Jack's voice was almost a whisper. She asked me last week if her mom would have wanted her to live somewhere with more sunshine. He looked up, eyes glassy. I didn't know what to say. Ava reached forward, placing her hand on his forearm. You tell her that love isn't in a place. It's in people. And wherever you are with her, that's the sunshine. Jack let out a slow breath. That answer felt like something he'd been searching for and hadn't known how to find. Ava leaned back slightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You know, after Lily passed, I tried to busy myself. Flew more. Worked more. Everyone told me I needed to stay strong. She made quotation marks with her fingers. But being strong isn't always what we think. Sometimes it's showing up for someone else when you haven't figured out how to show up for yourself. Jack nodded slowly. I think maybe that's what you did today. Ava turned to him, meeting his gaze. Maybe that's what we did. Emily stirred again. This time, her little eyes blinked open, and she looked up at Ava. Her tiny hand reached once more, this time not just to touch, but to hold. Ava took it, gently. And this time, she didn't try to hold back the tears. I don't know what this is, Jack whispered, but I haven't felt this safe in a long time. Neither have I, Ava replied, voice trembling. Outside, the plane continued its journey across a darkened sky. But inside row 1A, something more powerful was taking flight. A father began to believe again. A woman began to heal again, and a little girl, asleep and unaware, had already begun to build a bridge between 2 broken souls. The golden hues of sunset stretched long across the sky, casting soft orange light through the airplane's windows. Seat 1A had never felt like this before, not luxurious, not expensive, just human. Jack Callahan glanced down at Emily, now sleeping soundly on his chest, her fingers curled gently into the fabric of his shirt. Her fever had gone down. Her breaths were quieter. For the first time in what felt like weeks, she looked peaceful. And next to him sat Ava Carter. Still watching, still present. Her gaze wasn't on the view outside anymore. It was on them, noticing the little rise and fall of Emily's chest, noticing the way Jack hadn't moved in 20 minutes for fear of waking her, noticing it all and feeling it. She didn't say a word. But she didn't have to. Jack whispered, You don't have to keep sitting here. If you need to sleep. Ava turned to him, offering a soft, tired smile. I'm right where I need to be. Jack felt something shift in his chest. The sentence felt simple, but it hit like a confession. They sat in silence for a while, letting the sounds of the plane, the steady hum of the engine, the occasional rustle of plastic packaging fill in the space around them. It was Jack who spoke again. I haven't had a real conversation in a long time. Not one like this. Not one where I didn't feel like I was a burden. Ava looked at him. You're not. He shook his head slightly. When you're a single parent, you get used to being invisible. Or worse, a problem for other people. In doctors' offices, at grocery stores, especially when she starts coughing or crying. People stop seeing a person. They just see noise. Ava's eyes softened. My mother used to say the world teaches you how loud you're allowed to be. And for some of us, that lesson starts way too early. Jack looked at her carefully. Your mother sounds like a smart woman. She was, Ava said quietly. Taught me everything I needed to survive. But I'm still learning how to live. The words settled between them like dust on an untouched table. Can I ask something personal? Jack said after a pause. Ava nodded. Why me? Why today? Why not just stay in your seat and pretend you didn't see us struggling? Ava exhaled slowly, her fingers idly tracing the airplane charm on her bracelet. There's something that happens when you've lost a child. You become attuned. You notice pain in places others don't. I saw your daughter and something inside me just cracked open. She looked away for a moment, like she was trying to gather something fragile. My daughter, Lily, she never got the chance to cry on a flight, or cling to me when she was sick, or call me Mom in a sleepy voice. I thought those moments were gone forever, but when I saw you holding Emily, it felt like I could borrow one. Jack blinked slowly. Borrow? She smiled faintly. Just for a moment, just long enough to remember what that might have felt like. He didn't speak. There was nothing to say, only the kind of silence that wrapped around two people who had seen grief up close and somehow chose kindness anyway. You're not just kind, Jack finally said. You're brave. I know it hurts, but you still opened yourself up again. Ava let out a soft laugh, low and tired. Kindness is risky, isn't it? It demands we stay soft in a world that tries to harden us, but sometimes the risk is the only way back to ourselves. She turned to look at Emily again. She has your eyes, Ava whispered. Jack smiled. She's got her mom's fire, though. That little girl could move mountains if she felt strong enough. Ava looked at him then. Really looked. And you? Who tells you that you're strong enough? Jack's smile faded. He looked down. No one, really, not since my wife passed. I just push through, fix things, drive. Hold it all together with duct tape and prayer. Ava reached over then slowly, gently, and placed her hand on his. You shouldn't have to do it alone. Jack didn't pull away. Not this time. Something about her hand there, solid, steady, made him want to believe her. He let out a long breath. You know, when we were waiting to board, I kept thinking we weren't going to make it. That I'd have to carry her back home without seeing the doctor. And I kept asking myself how much longer I could hold on. He looked at her, eyes moist. But now I think maybe this flight wasn't about getting to a hospital. Maybe it was about being seen, for the first time in a long time. Ava squeezed his hand gently. You were always worth seeing, Jack. They stayed that way for a while, connected, not by romance, not by obligation, but by something deeper. Recognition. Two people who carried stories full of weight and silence, finally sharing the load. As the cabin lights dimmed further and most passengers slipped into slumber, Ava reached into her bag. She pulled out a small velvet pouch. Jack watched curiously as she untied the string and handed it to him. Inside was a tiny charm. Silver, the shape of a feather. This was Lily's, Ava said softly. It's been with me on every flight since she passed. I always told myself I'd know when it was time to let someone else carry it for a while. Jack looked down at the charm in his palm. I can't take this. You're not taking it, she said. You're borrowing it, just like I borrowed a moment with your daughter. He nodded, unable to speak. And just like that, something invisible but real passed between them, a quiet exchange of grace. By the time the captain announced they were beginning their descent, neither of them were ready. Not because they feared the destination, but because something in that sky, in that seat, in each other, felt like home. As the seatbelt sign lit up and the soft chime echoed through the cabin, Jack Callahan shifted slightly, trying not to wake Emily. Her small hand was wrapped around his thumb. Ava Carter glanced over at them again, her eyes full of something that looked a lot like peace, and something else too. Longing, maybe even fear. The descent had begun. And with it came reality. Outside the window, the glowing city lights below shimmered like scattered stars. The magic of the clouds, the hush of the altitude, it would all disappear soon. Replaced by crowds, announcements, and life waiting outside the terminal doors. But in that quiet space between sky and ground, something had taken root, a connection neither of them had expected. Jack leaned toward Ava slightly. "We're almost there," he whispered, not really meaning the destination. Ava nodded. "Funny how a 2-hour flight can change everything." He smiled. "It didn't change everything. It just reminded me that I'm not as alone as I thought." She hesitated. Then said, "When I gave up my seat, I didn't know what I was doing. It was instinct, but now I realize maybe I was making space in my life, not just my seat." Jack looked at her with quiet wonder. "Do you think the universe puts the right people beside us when we least expect it?" "I think," Ava said, "the universe waits for us to be just tired enough to let someone in." They both smiled, but it was the kind of smile that holds weight, like two people who had carried too much for too long. As the plane touched the runway with a soft jolt, Jack felt Emily stir against his chest. Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't fully wake. She mumbled something into his shirt, then sighed and fell back into sleep. Ava watched her tenderly. "She trusts you completely." "I've failed her more times than I can count." "No," Ava said firmly. "You showed up. You kept going. That's what matters." The flight attendant passed by, nodding at them. "Hope your little one feels better," she said with a warm smile. "She already does," Jack replied. The plane taxied toward the gate. People began to stir. Phones turned back on. Voices returned to normal volume. But Jack and Ava didn't move. They sat still, as if rising too soon would break whatever fragile thing had formed between them. When the seatbelt light blinked off, Ava finally stood. She looked back at Jack. "I called ahead," she said. "The hospital you're heading to. I made sure a pediatric specialist would be ready. I know someone there." Jack blinked. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." She hesitated, then added, "And I'd like to take you there. I have a driver waiting." "It's not far." Jack looked down at Emily, then back at Ava. "Why are you doing all this?" Ava swallowed. "Because I remember what it's like to need help and be too proud or too tired to ask for it." He stood slowly, cradling Emily close. As they moved toward the front of the plane, Jack felt eyes on him, not with judgment, but curiosity. A man from row 5 gave him a quiet nod. A woman near the door gave Ava a familiar look, almost a respectful acknowledgement. Jack turned to her, puzzled. "They know you?" he asked. Ava gave a small smile. "I've been in the news a bit. Business world stuff. Are you famous?" "Only in boardrooms," she joked. They exited the jet bridge into the terminal. The air was cooler, sharper. Waiting just beyond the security barrier was a sleek black car, a driver holding a placard that read, "Carter." Jack stopped in his tracks. You're Ava Carter?" She nodded gently. "The Ava Carter, the CEO." She looked at him carefully. "Does that change anything?" He stared at her, then shook his head. "No, I just didn't expect someone like you to notice someone like me." Ava stepped closer. "Jack, the only thing that separates us is the world's assumptions. Not our hearts." She opened the car door. "Let's get Emily to that doctor." As they pulled away from the terminal, the city blurred past. Jack stared out the window for a while, lost in thought. Then he turned to Ava. Do you ever feel like your life is all about fixing things, but never really healing? All the time, she admitted. But maybe healing doesn't always look like we expect. They arrived at the hospital entrance. Ava stepped out first, coffee cup in hand, her eyes watching Jack and Emily carefully. Jack emerged slowly, Emily still sleeping in his arms. I can't thank you enough, he said. You already have, he paused. This isn't just kindness, is it? No, Ava said. It's something else. I'm not sure what to call it yet. Jack nodded. Neither of them said more. They didn't need to. The doors to the hospital opened, and for the first time in days, Jack walked through them, not alone. The hospital lobby was quiet. Too quiet. Jack Callahan stood just inside the entrance, Emily sleeping against his chest, her breath a soft rhythm against his shirt. Beside him, Ava Carter cradled a coffee cup, her fingers absently turning the lid. But her eyes never left the child. A nurse at the counter recognized Ava and waved discreetly. Within moments, they were escorted to a pediatric room, one typically reserved for private clients. Jack tried to protest. We don't need special treatment, he said quietly. But Ava gently placed her hand on his shoulder. You do today. The door clicked shut behind them. It was warm inside, peaceful. A few moments later, the doctor entered. Not a resident, not a rotating physician, but the doctor. The one Jack had fought to reach, Dr. Whitaker. A quiet man with decades of knowledge and eyes that read symptoms before the chart even opened. He greeted Ava with a familiar nod. You always call when it matters, he said. She gestured toward Jack. This is who it's for. Dr. Whitaker turned to Jack, then to Emily, still cradled in her father's arms. His voice was soft, sure. Let's take a look at your little one. Jack hesitated, but Ava gently reached for Emily, and he let her go, trusting someone else for the first time in years. As the doctor examined her, Jack sat at the edge of the couch, elbows on knees, head bowed. Ava sat beside him, but gave him space. Minutes passed, then more. Jack broke the silence. I thought we were out of time. Ava's voice was barely above a whisper. So did I. For a lot of things. He looked over at her, and in the stillness between them was something new, not just gratitude, but quiet understanding. The kind that only comes from surviving something you don't talk about. Doctor. Whitaker returned. He was smiling. She's not out of the woods, he said gently. But you brought her just in time. We've got a plan. We'll start treatment today. I'll have a team monitoring her overnight. Jack exhaled so hard it was almost a sob. Thank you. Dr. Whitaker placed a hand on his shoulder. You did the hard part, son. You got her here. He turned to Ava. And you still know how to bring the right people together. When they were alone again, Jack slumped slightly. I can't believe she's going to be okay. Ava smiled, but it was small, tentative. Sometimes life just gives us a break. He looked at her again. Really looked. You do this often? Rescue strangers at airport gates? Ava laughed softly. No. I usually avoid eye contact on flights. Then why today? She looked down, turning her bracelet. Because when I saw you holding her, something in me just moved. And for once, I didn't second-guess it. He nodded. I'm glad you didn't. Hours passed. Emily slept soundly in her hospital bed. Jack and Ava sat in the cafeteria downstairs, 2 cups of coffee between them. Nothing fancy, just warmth in paper cups. Jack stirred his with a plastic stick, watching the swirls. You're not what I expected, he said finally. Ava tilted her head. What did you expect? I don't know. You're powerful. Known. You walk like you own the room, but then you gave up your seat, drove us here and sat with us like you were nobody. Her voice was quiet. Sometimes it's nice to be nobody, even if just for a little while. Jack nodded. I used to be someone too. Before Emily's mum died, I had friends, a job that felt like it mattered. Now I fix broken appliances and hope I have enough to cover medicine. Ava reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. Inside was a photo faded, a little wrinkled. A baby's ultrasound image clipped to a boarding pass. She never made it, Ava said. The baby. Her name was Isabel. Jack didn't speak. Just let the silence carry the weight. I built everything after that, Ava continued. The company, the reputation, but nothing filled the space she left behind. Jack looked at the photo, then at Ava. Then why help me? She met his eyes. Because you remind me of who I was supposed to become. And your daughter? She reminded me what love feels like again. Jack swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say, but he didn't need to. Sometimes words got in the way of truth. Instead, he reached into his old canvas bag and pulled something out, a small metal charm shaped like an airplane. It was rough. Homemade, probably once part of a zipper pull. He handed it to her. I made this when Emily was born. Told myself it was to remind me to keep going. Ava took it gently. It's beautiful. It was mine, Jack said. But now I think it's yours. She blinked, trying to hold back the tide rising in her chest. Thank you. He smiled. For what? For letting me matter. That night they didn't talk about the future. Not yet. They just sat in a hospital hallway with vending machines humming and nurses walking by and let the stillness hold them. It was the kind of night that didn't need to be explained, only remembered. And in the quiet, both of them felt something neither had felt in years, home. Not a place, not a house, but in the presence of someone who sees you even when you've forgotten how to see yourself. The rain had stopped, but the streets still held its memory. It was Sunday morning. The hospital discharged Emily just before dawn, and Jack carried her in his arms with a lightness he hadn't felt in weeks. Her fever had broken. Her eyes were brighter, and though she was still weak, her spirit seemed lighter, like her little body finally believed it was safe to heal. Outside, Ava waited. Her car was parked along the curb, engine warm, coffee in hand. She wasn't wearing makeup. No statement jewelry, just jeans, a cream sweater, and that same silver bracelet, only now it held a second charm. The one Jack had given her. When Jack stepped out, Emily raised her head slowly and whispered, Ava. It was the first word she'd said that day. Ava smiled, knelt down, and held out her arms. Jack hesitated, but Emily leaned forward on her own, pressing her cheek against Ava's shoulder. For a moment, neither woman nor child said a word, and Jack stood there, watching a piece of his guarded world shift without permission. They drove in comfortable silence. Jack's apartment was small, 2 rooms tucked behind a laundromat, but it was clean and warm. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and instant coffee. Toys were tucked into corners. A single photo hung on the fridge. Jack, holding a newborn Emily, bags under his eyes, and joy on his face. Ava looked around, not with pity, but with respect. This is yours? She asked gently. Jack nodded. I know it's not much. She shook her head. It's more than enough. Emily sat on the couch, curled in a blanket, holding her favorite stuffed bunny. Her voice was quiet, but sure. Are you staying for breakfast? Ava looked at Jack. He raised an eyebrow. We've got oatmeal, and maybe half a banana. Ava laughed. Sounds like a feast. They shared breakfast at the tiny kitchen table, legs brushing beneath the wobbly wood. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't planned. But it was real, and sometimes real is all anyone needs. Afterward, Emily took Ava's hand and led her to the window. That's the park, she said, pointing to the patch of green 2 blocks away. I want to go when I'm stronger. Ava squeezed her hand. Then we'll go together. Jack leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Watching them, he realized something terrifying. He didn't want her to leave, not because she was rich, not because she'd helped, but because for the first time in years, he felt like someone saw him not as a man scrambling to survive, but as a father worth knowing. Later that day, as the sun climbed higher, Ava helped tidy up while Jack napped beside Emily. She didn't ask. She just folded laundry, swept the kitchen, rearranged a few things. Not to judge, just to help. And when Jack woke, he found a note on the counter. "You've built more than a home here. You've built a world that deserves gentleness. Thank you for letting me inside it, Ava." Jack didn't call her that night, but he read that note 4 times before bed. The next morning, the doorbell rang. It was Ava. This time she wasn't alone. In her hands were 3 things: a paper bag with groceries, a second-hand storybook with a red ribbon bookmark, and a small plant in a cracked ceramic pot. "I figured you could use a little green in here," she said. Jack laughed. "We haven't kept anything alive except Sophie." "Then you're better than most," she said with a smile. They shared coffee again, this time on the steps outside, watching Emily draw with sidewalk chalk. She was stronger already. Ava could see it in the way she stood, in the way she hummed softly while she worked. "She's incredible," Ava whispered. Jack didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the child that had given his life meaning. "She saved me," he said. "I thought I was holding her up all these years, but it's the other way around." Ava looked at him, and something clicked. This wasn't about saving each other. It was about walking beside someone who refused to give up. Before she left that morning, Emily ran inside and came back with something small in her hand. It was a button. Plastic, pale pink, a spare from her old baby dress. "I want you to have it," she said to Ava, "because you were nice when I was scared." Ava knelt, brushing a curl from Emily's forehead. "I'll keep it forever," she whispered. Then she placed the button gently into the pocket of her coat next to the airplane charm. That evening, Jack sat at the table with a pen and the back of a grocery receipt. He wasn't sure what he was writing. Maybe it was a letter, maybe it was just a thought, but the words spilled anyway. When someone shows up for you at your worst, not to rescue, but to stay, that's not kindness. That's grace. He folded the paper and slid it into his wallet. He didn't know what tomorrow held, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of the landing. Because maybe, just maybe, someone would be waiting at the gate. The following Saturday began with sun streaming through the kitchen window, casting golden stripes across the faded checkered tiles. Jack Callahan stood at the stove, flipping pancakes that weren't perfectly round and didn't quite match in size, but Sophie didn't care. "Dad," she said through a mouthful, "this one looks like a cloud." "Then it must taste like sunshine," he replied. Across the kitchen, Ava Carter was pouring coffee, barefoot, hair pulled back loosely. She was wearing one of Jack's flannel shirts, too big, too soft, just right. They didn't talk about labels. They didn't need to, because some things didn't need names to be real. After breakfast, they went to the park, like Sophie had asked weeks earlier when her voice was weak and her legs couldn't hold her weight. But today, she ran, laughed, grabbed both their hands and made them spin like kids. For a moment, they weren't a broken father, a grieving woman, and a recovering child. They were simply a family. Later that afternoon, Jack sat on the back porch with Ava beside him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. Sophie was inside, building something with blocks and stuffed animals. "I never thought I'd feel this again," he said softly. Ava looked up. "What?" "Stillness. Belonging." "Like, I can actually exhale." She didn't answer right away. Her fingers laced through his. "I spent years building walls," she said. "The career, the silence, the distance, all to avoid the one thing I lost, and yet here I am, learning to breathe again beside you and a little girl with mismatched socks." Jack laughed. "That's her signature look," Ava smiled. "It's perfect." They were quiet for a while, listening to the wind, to Sophie humming in the background, to the rhythm of something deeply human healing. That night, Sophie asked if Ava could read to her before bed. Ava nodded and sat on the edge of the mattress as Sophie tucked her bunny beside her pillow. Jack stood in the doorway, watching quietly. The book was about birds. Flight. A little swallow who didn't think she could make it through winter until someone flew beside her. Halfway through, Sophie fell asleep. Ava closed the book gently and placed it on the nightstand. As she got up, she saw a small paper heart taped to the wall. Crayon letters scrawled across it. "You're my co-pilot." Her eyes blurred. When she returned to the living room, Jack was waiting with 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one without speaking. She took a sip, then placed her hand on his. "Have you ever thought," she said quietly, "how one seat, just one moment of kindness can become a whole new direction?" Jack nodded. "That flight saved more than just her. It saved me. And maybe it gave you something back too." She looked into his eyes, and there it was, the understanding that didn't need explanation. The kind you only find after you've both lived through the storm and decided to come back out anyway. The next morning, they took a walk around the neighborhood. Sophie skipped ahead, counting cracks in the sidewalk. When they passed a small boutique near the corner, Ava stopped. In the window was a tiny wooden sign that read, "Sometimes home isn't a place. It's a person or two." She smiled, then reached for Jack's hand. Later that week, Ava brought a small box to Jack's apartment. Inside was a bracelet. On it were 3 charms, a tiny airplane, a silver bunny, and 3 engraved letters S.J.A. Sophie. Jack. Ava. Jack looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at her. "We didn't plan this," he said. "No," she replied, "but maybe it planned us." He reached for her. Not in a rush, not as a question, just as an answer. A few months later, they took another flight. Same airline, same destination. But everything was different. Sophie wore her backpack proudly. Ava carried snacks and puzzles. Jack handled the boarding passes. As they found their seats, together this time, Sophie turned to Ava and whispered, "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" Ava smiled. "No, but I'm glad I didn't." As the plane took off, Sophie leaned into Jack's shoulder, and Ava took his other hand. Somewhere above the clouds, the 3 of them sat side by side, no longer strangers on a flight, but a family in flight. Because sometimes, what begins as a seat in coach or a stranger's kindness becomes the rest of your life. Sometimes, the greatest changes in our lives come not through grand gestures, but through quiet, unexpected kindness. Jack's story, a tired single father, doing everything he can for his sick daughter, reminds us of the silent struggles many carry. And Ava, a woman who had every reason to keep to herself, chose instead to step forward with compassion. For older viewers who have seen both hardship and healing, this story is a gentle but powerful reminder. Connection can still happen when we least expect it. No one is ever too broken to matter, and no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. We may not always be able to fix what's broken, but we can still choose to stand beside someone who's hurting. In a world that often forgets to slow down, choosing to care is a radical act. Whether it's offering a seat, sharing a conversation, or simply showing up, these are the moments that shape lives. As this story beautifully shows, it's never too late to matter in someone else's story. And sometimes, opening your heart to others might just be the start of your own second chapter.